Oh, Honduras has some fantastic food. So, in the north part of Honduras, um, there's a couple of popular dishes. So the one thing you will eat is the baleada. Practice that word because you are going to eat a lot of them. So what the baleada is, it's basically they just do a flour tortilla. The basic baleada, they do a flour tortilla. They put some refried beans. They put queso fresco, which is just a really salty dried cheese. And then they put mantequilla, which, don't be deceived because it's not butter. It's kind of like a sour cream. So your basic baleada is they do flour tortilla, beans, queso fresco, and mantequilla. And then depending on where you go, they get fancier. They'll put scrambled egg and chorizo or avocado, all kinds of different things. Chicken, you can get all kinds of different things in baleadas, but so good. And you will eat so many because that is the breakfast and lunch meal of choice of Hondurans is a baleada. Yeah, I really miss baleadas. They're so good. Another thing that's very popular and delicious on the northern coast is called pollo con tajadas, which is basically they do fried chicken, and then they'll take plantains and slice them up, kind of like chips, and fry them. So they're basically like banana French fries, which sounds weird, but it's so good. And they'd kind of serve that. They do the chicken and the tajadas, and they do cabbage with kind of a creamy sauce. And we had one sister in my first area that she owned a shop that made pollo con tajadas, and every Tuesday night she'd give us an order of pollo con tajadas for dinner, and we looked forward to Tuesday night because it was so good. The fruit down there is fantastic because up here, a lot of the fruit you're getting from stores is imported from somewhere else. It's had time to age, and it's just not as good. Down there, my first area, we had a banana tree and a mango tree in the front yard. We'd go out for breakfast and chop down a mango, and it was fantastic. They also do one thing that I grew to love that I was not a fan of at the beginning was they'll take plantains that are ripe. So when they make tajadas, they use a green plantain, so it's a little stiffer. But they'll take a ripe one and fry that, and it kind of makes it sweet. And so for dinner, a lot of times they do like those sweet plantains, just with cheese and mantequilla and beans. And when I first got into the mission, that was really weird, and not my favorite. But now that I'm home, I will make that for myself for dessert because it is so good. One weird thing that I struggled with was sopa de mondongo, which is a soup that they make. First of all, I love Honduran food, but it is so hot, and I remember they'd come out with these steaming bowls of soup for lunch, and I'm like, it's 100 degrees outside. Why are you serving me hot soup? And that was hard, but they have one soup that is sopa de mondongo, and it's, if I remember right, it's the stomach of the cow is the meat, which was interesting, and that was one food that I never really grew to love. It was pretty tough and chewy. Jugo de maracuya, which is passion fruit juice, so good. It was fantastic. I loved that. Also, so one thing they have down in Honduras, they don't have big stores like Walmart or Smith's like we do here. They do, but only in big cities, and they were too expensive for the missionaries to go to. What they have down there are pulperias, which is basically someone would just take their living room and they'd knock out a window, and they'd just stock their living room with just little bags of chips, or they'd have beans, and they'd have rice, and they'd have things to cook with. They'd have cookies and just little things, and these things were everywhere. I mean, you'd have pulperias on all the streets, and that was where you'd shop. You'd go to the pulperia, you'd get your, if you're hungry, you get a bag of chips. You get your stuff for dinner that night, some tomatoes, beans, whatever. And so that's the main shopping thing is, parents will send their kid down to the nearest pulperia to go get whatever they need for dinner. Another thing that was weird at first that now I can't believe we don't do here in the United States was a lot of their drinks came in bags. For example, they'd have just bags of water they were about this big, and it'd just be water, and you'd bite the corner off and then just drink it. And I don't know why we don't do that here. It's so much easier, and you don't have to deal with cups, and it's just easier. But one thing that I know a lot of people love that I really struggled with, we had is arroz con leche, which is just, it's rice and milk. I remember I had an investigator that they gave us a big bowl of arroz con leche, and it was so good, and we ate all of it, and it was a big mistake. It was right after lunch. It was a hot day. I got really sick, and the problem is then my body just said, you shouldn't eat that anymore. And it wasn't even that I didn't like it, it was just I couldn't eat it. I would just gag on it, which was really hard because people like to serve that. So don't eat a lot of arroz con leche in the afternoon.
The typical Honduran plate that they give you, there are tortillas, corn tortillas. They're really thin, and I like them. They don't have a ton of flavor, but I don't think a picky eater could complain about that. You usually get served beans and rice, but I didn't eat as much rice as I did like beans and tortillas and cheese. So typical cheese there is really different. And this, I think maybe for somebody coming, not used to it, would be a little bit like shocked. But the cheese there is like, they give you these little small rectangles of hard white cheese, and it's really salty, really, really salty cheese. And so a lot of people hated that. A lot of American elders that I talked to, they're like, I hate that salty cheese. It's so salty. I learned to really love it because the tortillas were so bland, not bland, but they were kind of plain. So if you just crumbled up that cheese on top of your beans, they also serve eggs and sausage. So you usually get like scrambled eggs, maybe sometimes some sausage, beans, that little cheese, and fried plantains, which I love so much, which I didn't like because I went to an El Salvador restaurant that fried like the big ones, and I don't really like them when they're like really like big because they're so sweet, and that was like, ugh, this is sweet, I'm not used to that. But there they slice them up thinly and they fry them, and so they start to caramelize, and they pour cream on it, and then sometimes I'll sprinkle that salty cheese on that. It's really good. I loved the food, and that's usually what I had. Or they'd give you sopa, soup. They serve lots of soups there, usually with like vegetables, with different types of bananas. They have tons of different bananas there. They'll slice them up and cook that, and different vegetables that you've never seen in your life. You'll see fruits that you're like, what is that? Like, am I in this exotic random dimension? But it's really cool. There are a lot of different fruits and vegetables that I'd never eaten that I loved, and I didn't eat anything that nasty. If anything, just like some weird food combos that I had never thought of. I'm not a big fan of sweet drinks, but they have a few different like rose petal drinks and different drinks that I wasn't fond of, but I didn't hate them. Maybe the most shocking or gross food that would be weird for a missionary is sopa de mondongo, which is like a soup that has like some part of a cow intestine. Like I think it's the upper part of the stomach or the cow intestine, something like that. But it's like a famous typical dish, a Honduran dish. It's, everyone talks about. But luckily I dodged that one because I think just me being a white sister, they thought, oh, she won't like that. So they never served it to me, just assuming that I wouldn't want it. But most people will eat that. So other foods I can't think of, but I really like the food. It's simple, really simple, but it was good. Oh, actually, one more thing. Something weird that they would do is they love eating spaghetti, but the way they make spaghetti is not typical. They'll like put mayonnaise and ketchup and maybe some butter and onion to like, that's their sauce that they put in their spaghetti. And they'll eat that with a tortilla. So, I mean, the ingredients I'm totally fine with, so I was okay with it. But it's definitely something I would not eat on my own. And then another funny thing is you'll see Chinese restaurants in Honduras all over the place. And they just love Chinese food. But it's really different. You know how in the US, we have Americanized Chinese food. Like Panda Express is not probably the real Chinese food. They kind of do that with Chinese food there. They have their Honduran version of it. And just a funny random thing, I don't know why they do it, but they always serve white bread, slices of white bread with Chinese food. It's like what you have to eat when you are eating. Like, yeah, like they'll have their chow mein and all their other stuff, and then complimentary white slices of bread. So I thought that was funny.
The food of Honduras is pretty interesting. Like, people assume it'll be like Mexican food, and it's not. Mexican food's like really spicy, and Honduran food I feel is very, very bland. And in Honduras, it's very common for the missionaries for lunch, instead of making their own lunch, they'll actually find a woman, maybe a member or an investigator, to make them lunch every day. So you just pay her a certain amount every couple weeks and she'll make you lunch every day, which I thought was really nice. I loved not having to make my own lunch. But it also meant I had to eat whatever she gave me. So I remember my first area, my first cocinera, it was just plain white rice, boiled red, I think they're red kidney beans, and then some sort of meat. And when she cooked, the meat was seasoned the same way every single day. So it's basically the same lunch every day. And I didn't like it. I'm not really before my mission, I was not a big rice and beans fan, especially if they're just boiled. But the food that's most, how do I say this in English? The first, like, typical food is the baleada. And the baleada is a flour tortilla that they make from scratch. And then you put refried beans and some cheese on there. And then you fold it in half and you eat it. And they eat that every single day for breakfast and dinner, but they never eat it for lunch. But they're so delicious. I ate 464 of them on my mission. And they're my favorite Honduran food. That and tajadas. They take plátano, how do you say that in English? Plantains. And they slice them and then they deep fry them and you put sour cream on them and it's so good. But then there's another type of tajada that's super common and they make it from guineo. And in Honduras, guineo means an unripened banana, a green, hard banana. And they eat them all the time because they're super cheap. So if they make them into tajadas, they'll do the same thing where they slice it and deep fry it. And then they put like shredded cabbage and meat and like a sauce on it, and it's delicious. And other times they'll take the guineo and they just cut it in half and then they boil it and then they use it as a side dish for your lunch, and it's disgusting. It's the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. It's like dry and it's flavorless, but you eat it like every day. And it's a big joke around the mission, like, why do they eat guineo when they could just wait for it to be ripe and eat a banana? But I don't know, you get used to the food. And there's a really famous soda, it's banana flavored soda. And at first you kind of hate it, and then eventually it grows on you and you think it's delicious. So if you've ever heard of a place where I can buy banana soda, let me know, because I've never found a place.